where a select committee there in American Parliament actually has made the suggestion that perhaps India should be included in NATO Plus. Now, of course, NATO is an alliance centered around Europe and America as the Atlantic, but it does have allies in the Pacific, countries like Japan, for example. And some talk, can India be invited to join NATO Plus? India historically has said, we don't want to be part of anybody's military alliance, thank you very much, we prefer to be non-aligned. But what is this offer all about? Is it formally going to be made? And should India even consider it? And for more on that, let me get in my friend Professor Harsh Pant, who's been tracking the centre. I think somebody who does actually believe that India needs to be very closely talking to the West in order to deal with China. What do you make, Professor Pant, about this entire concept of NATO Plus? Is it something that we should be even thinking about or considering?
See, my point of view is, Vikram, everything is worth considering at this point. I think, there is no sense in not considering alternatives to what our current policy is, because clearly the current policy is not working. So from a purely public policy point of view, every alternative that is available, that is being talked about, and especially one where we seem to be talking about strengthening or bringing in external partners, it should be considered. The debate should at least start. It's not simply, it's not a matter whether it is right or wrong or what kind of strings will be attached. That's a debate we can have. But to keep it off the table, I don't think should be an option.
But Professor Pant, the first question to really ask is an offer actually on the table at all? Yes, a select committee has said perhaps it is something that should be done. But as of now, it's not clear that any such official offer is there to actually be thought about or debated.
No, I don't think so. It is at this point, on the table. I think partly this is also because we have grown so accustomed to saying within India that we will never be part of an alliance, that if there is an alliance structure outside, why would they come to India and say you become part of an alliance? Because I think there is seemingly a political consensus, at least from the outside, that Indians don't like alliances, that Indian political systems won't agree to such a formulation or such a policy, and therefore, I think from their point of view, there is no need for them to come up with this kind of an alternative. But what seems to be happening at the moment is certainly NATO as a whole is changing. Their policy focus, their structural focus from purely a European construct to an Indo-Pacific threat perception vis-a-vis China is emerging. And I think we need to be part of that conversation at least.
No, you're absolutely right. There has been a consensus here in India that there should be no question of a military alliance with everybody else. But if there's any reason to change that consensus, it's now, given the stance that China has taken, given the threats that China is posting on our borders. So do you think that perhaps one of the reasons why that consensus could change now from what has been there for the last 70, 75 years?
See, I think many things have changed as China threat has evolved. Our reluctance to do several things has come into question. We have changed our policy vis-a-vis the US. We have look at the kind of defense agreements now that we have with the US and how closely we coordinate with the US on a range of issues, very technical, very specific military issues, sharing of intelligence or sharing of logistics, etc. So I think a lot has changed because the threat perception has changed, and therefore, in my opinion, there is no harm in considering what alternatives exist. Now, a decade back or more than a decade back when it was started, we junked Quad as well. Now Quad has been resurrected. Quad has come into its own. So I think a lot has happened because the environment has changed, and therefore, the policy options in front of India should also evolve as the threat perception evolves. Again, this is not a this is not a question of India agreeing on the terms, perhaps, that NATO is coming and we join NATO. The question is, are we open to alliances? We have moved from a position where we used to say we are non-aligned. Now our ex-foreign secretary said openly that we are no longer non-aligned. We are willing to align on the basis of issues. So issue-based alliances we are talking about, issue-based coalitions we are talking about, and I think that is a response to the kind of challenges we face. So whether we like NATO or not, NATO is there, and we should start thinking what we can do with NATO.
Professor Harshpan, thank you so much for joining us. And before we move on any further, let's just quickly take you through another one of our regular segments, a quick scan through what the international press has actually been saying this week.
In a surprising move, Chinese media has congratulated Prime Minister Narendra Modi for inaugurating the new parliament and gradually erasing the traces of colonial era in the country. China's The Global Times newspaper, in its editorial, wrote, "In recent years, the Modi government has devoted itself to presenting an image of a rising India that engages in decolonization and emphasizes independent confidence. India has also undertaken large-scale actions to remove symbols of colonialism, including renaming and remodeling iconic buildings, changing budget practices associated with colonial history, and increasing the use of the Hindi language." Time magazine, however, labeled the opening of the Indian parliament as a controversial move. In its article, it mentioned that since the commencement of the construction of the new parliament, politicians, environmentalists, and civil society groups have voiced their concerns, criticizing the new building for its cost and the absence of consultation. Numerous individuals have raised questions regarding why the government opted not to renovate the existing building instead. The article also pointed out that the ruling BJP received backlash for sidelining President Draupadi Murmu during the inauguration, as they asked the Prime Minister to perform the inauguration instead. The Indian government's decision to retire 2,000 rupee notes has raised concerns reminiscent of a similar campaign in 2016, triggering bad memories for many, the New York Times said in a report this week. The impact of this move on businesses experiencing a shortage of change has been relatively minor. This is likely due to the fact that the 2,000 rupee notes account for less than 11% of the currency in circulation. The article also said that some economists have argued that the withdrawal of these high-denomination bills could aid in combating corruption, integrating workers into the formal economy, enhancing tax collection, and advancing India's efforts towards digital payments.